Barclays Bank announced an 8% rise in their first half-year profits today. It's, they say, boosted by their investment banking division. HSBC, they've reported their half-year profits at around £5 billion, although this was about half of what it made at the same period a year ago. But when we hear so much about banks being in problems and then being bailed out by the government, what kind of service are they providing to us at the moment? Let's speak to a guy that knows all about it, and Jonathan Armstrong-Davis, who's a chartered financial planner with Armstrong-Davis, joins us on the phone tonight. Hi, Jonathan.
Hello, Peter.
Tell us what you think we should make of these profits being announced. I'm sure they'll try and spin them in whatever way they can to make us trust them more, these big banks. But what is the overall picture, do you think?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think we should all start playing a game of Monopoly, and I, Bagsy, being the banker, because I can take whatever risks I want. I can make whatever reckless lending I want to make without any checks, because I know that once I make humongous losses, and we're talking tens or potentially hundreds of billions of pounds accumulatively for all the banks, I know that the government is going to bail me out. And remember, who is the government? The government is our taxes. And your listeners need to get to grips with this. The amount of the bailouts, which is the biggest in UK government history, the taxes that will rise after the next election and the public services cuts that will take place will be eye-watering. People will not know what's hit them.
So essentially we will end up paying for whatever bailouts that there's been in the past, is essentially what you're saying.
That's exactly right. We will be paying through the nose for the next 10 years.
These reckless gambles that you talk about that the banks have made, and we were speaking earlier on about the current state of play where houses are concerned, it's probably going to take us to 2014 before we can see any kind of comparison between the way house prices were then and what they're going to be all these years later. The kind of reckless gambles, are you talking about 100% mortgages that we're still trying to bail all of those gambles out all these years later?
Yes and no. You're referring to the National Housing Federation, which says that house prices are going to fall a bit this year and a little bit next year, but then they'll be rising from 2011. I think they're talking through their nose. These are the guys who last July, I checked because I saw the report and I thought, hold on, this is nonsense. Last July, they said house prices would rise 25% by 2013. Well, in 2008, house prices fell 15 to 20%. So I don't think they know what they're talking about. Our own forecast, I'm afraid to say, for people who've got mortgages, who've put their future into housing, they need to realise our view is that house prices are going to fall for the rest of the year, throughout the whole of 2010, and probably the whole of 2011, until they might bottom out in 2012, which is 2 or 3 years from now, and house prices are going to be 20 or 30% below where they are today. Going back to the risks, the reckless lending, it's not just on houses, 100% mortgages, 125% mortgages, as everybody knows, was happening in the latter stages of the lending stupidity, but it was also credit cards. You'd get a letter through the post saying, hey, why don't you take this credit card? You got another £5,000 or £10,000, letting people get to 50, 60, 80, £100,000 on plastic, of all things. Never mind that. Putting all that paling into insignificance is commercial property. The banks know that the bad debts they have on their books in the reckless lending in commercial property, shops, offices, manufacturing property, it's going to make the residential and the credit cards pale into insignificance. The bank's losses are going to come back again and again for the next couple of years. And you know what? They're going to go back to the government, and unfortunately I think whatever government it is going to bail them out again, because this banker or that banker is going to say, look, if you don't bail us out, we're going to bring down the system, and there's going to be great economic problems. Well, you know, it's a funny thing, Peter, but they've already bailed out the banks so far, and we have great economic problems. The currency went through the floor. House prices are down 20% from a year and a half ago. Households still have enormous debts. The government has enormous debts, the biggest peacetime level of government debt ever, which, as I say, is after the next election, because everything's deferred until next May, we are going to see humongous tax rises and, unfortunately, incredibly large public service cuts. That's when the reality of what's going on in the economy is going to hit home to the man and woman on the street.
Jonathan Armstrong Davis is the voice that you hear there, as an investment advisor, financial commentator as well. Excuse me, Jonathan, the issue that you talk about with businesses there and even homeowners, is there an element that maybe some home truths are coming home to roost as well, and that we did borrow way beyond our means in the past, and this is just nature's way of getting us back in many ways? We've lent too much, and now we're in a position where maybe we're at risk of losing our home or losing our business.
Well, that unfortunately is the result of having the biggest party we've ever had, and now we've got the biggest hangover. If you remember the original Star Trek, you had the engineer Scotty, who, if I can paraphrase him, Captain, you cannot change the laws of economics. If you borrow too much, eventually you're going to have to pay it back, or in this case, you're going to have to pay the price. And the price is, and again, it's all deferred until after the next election, there is going to be hundreds of thousands of home repossessions in this country. In the last housing crash in the early 1990s, we had 300,000 home repossessions. And I'm sorry, but the reality is that our economics are worse than then. They are as bad as, in fact, in the 1930s. And some people who were around before the war will remember how bad it was. In the 1930s, people should ask their grandparents what it was like. And when the grandparents in the past have joked about, all we got was an orange or a toy soldier at Christmas, they weren't joking. There was literally no money around. And that's what's going to happen for the next 10 years. There's going to be over 3 million unemployed. We had it's all relative. We had 1.7 million unemployed this time last year. We're already up to 2.5 million. I'm afraid to say by next year we're increasing by 100,000 a month. We're going to have 3.25 to 3.5 million unemployed. And parents of youngsters will remember what 3 million unemployed was like in the 1980s. It's going to be worse because the difference is now people are also up to their eyeballs in debt. We are in a dreadful state, and it makes me vomit when I hear estate agents and politicians saying green shoots. I tell you what, not to put too fine a point in it, my armpits have got more green shoots than the economy.
Maybe should come with parental guidance, that whole interview. But thank you very much for putting probably what you see as a realistic point of view on the whole thing, Jonathan. Appreciate your time tonight.
You're very welcome.
Jonathan Armstrong Davis there, who's an advisor in the financial game and responding to the massive levels of profit that the likes of Barclays, HSBC were announcing today. Picture's going to go a whole lot worse if you listen to what Jonathan Armstrong Davis has to say there.